Should I begin, Anand Bihari Prabhu? Or
Yes, we're all good to go.
yeah. So it's telling me recording in progress, and I can share my screen. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Let me do that. Hare Krishna, everyone. Welcome. Let's start with our usual prayers. And I also realized I didn't change my name here. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading today from Canto 9, Chapter 15, verse number 25. Savai Ratnam tu tadrishtva Atma Aishwarya Atishayanam Tad na adriyata Agnihotriam Sa Abhilashaha Sahayaha. Translation. Kartavirya Arjuna thought that Jamadagni was more powerful and wealthy than himself because of possessing a jewel in the form of Kamadhenu. Therefore, he and his own men, the Hayas, were not very much appreciative of Jamadagni's reception. On the contrary, they wanted to possess that Kamadhenu, which was useful for the execution of the Agnihotra sacrifice. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Jamadagni was more powerful than Kartavirya Arjuna because of performing the Agnihotra Yagya with clarified butter or ghee received from the Kamadhenu cow. Not everyone can be expected to possess such a cow. Nevertheless, an ordinary man may possess an ordinary cow, give protection to this animal, take sufficient milk from it, and engage the milk to produce butter and ghee, especially for performing the Agnihotra Yagya. This is possible for everyone. Thus, we find that in Bhagavad-Gita, Lord Krishna advises Go Raksha, the protection of cows. Go means cows and Raksha means protection. This is essential because if cows are cared for properly, they will surely supply sufficient milk. We have practical experience in America that in our various ISKCON farms, we are giving proper protection to the cows and receiving more than enough milk. In other farms, the cows do not deliver as much milk as in our farms because our cows know very well that we are not going to kill them. They are happy and they give ample milk. Therefore, this instruction given by Lord Krishna, Goraksha, is extremely meaningful. The whole world must learn from Krishna how to live happily without scarcity, simply by producing food grains, annat bhavanti bhutani, and giving protection to the cows, Goraksha. Krishi Goraksha Vanijam Vaishya Karma Swabhavajam. Those who belong to the third level of human society, namely the mercantile people or the Vaishyas, must keep land for producing food grains and giving protection to cows. This is the injunction of Bhagavad-Gita. In the matter of protecting the cows, the meat eaters will protest, but in answer to them, we may say that since Krishna gives stress to cow protection, those who are inclined to eat meat may eat the flesh of unimportant animals like hogs, dogs, goats, and sheep, but they should not touch the life of the cows, for this is destructive to the spiritual advancement of human society. The verse again, Śrimad Bhagavatam 9.15.25. Kartavirya Arjuna thought that Jamadagni was more powerful and wealthy than himself because of possessing a jewel in the form of the Kamadhenu. Therefore, he and his own men, the high Hayas, were not very much appreciative of Jamadagni's reception. On the contrary, they wanted to possess that Kamadhenu cow, which was useful for the execution of the Agnihotra sacrifice. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangum Langayate Girim Yat Kripatamaham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam. I'll just type something to Anand Bihari Prabhu. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Shri Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. I offer my obeisances first and foremost to His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, then to my Guru Maharaj, His Holiness Radhanath Swami, and to all the assembled Vaishnavas who have kindly assembled to hear and discuss Śrimad Bhagavatam. Topics of Krishna are the most elevating and uplifting, and Śrimad Bhagavatam tells us that those are actually the only topics meant for human beings, not anything else unconnected with Krishna. So it's my great honor and pleasure to be here with all of you today. And it's a great honor to be able to discuss Śrimad Bhagavatam at all, and especially in front of such wonderful souls as yourselves. I pray to all the devotees who are watching on Zoom and on YouTube to bless me so that I can speak words that are scripturally accurate, pleasing to the ears and hearts of Sri Sri Radha Murlidhar, Sri Gaurachandra, and Varaha Nrsimhadev, and which are inspiring to us all as devotees of Krishna. So today, the purport, I want to bring out 3 key points from the verse and the purport that Srila Prabhupada wrote. But before I do that, before I get into those 3 points, let me address the last point that Srila Prabhupada brought up. You know, that sounded, I'm going back to that purport, that sounded like Srila Prabhupada is saying, go ahead and eat meat of other animals like dogs, hogs, goats, and sheep. Is that what he's saying? No. What he's saying is, in the matter of protecting the cows, the meat eaters will protest. But in answer to them, we may say that since Krishna gives stress to cow protection, those who are inclined to eat meat may eat the flesh of unimportant animals like hogs, dogs, goats, and sheep, but they should not touch the life of the cows. So Prabhupada is not saying go ahead and eat meat. He's just saying that for those who absolutely cannot and will not give up meat, then maybe they can eat other animals like those mentioned in the purport. So it's definitely not a blanket endorsement of eating meat. Eating meat, we are told in different parts of the scripture, is harmful to our spiritual health because it kills the quality of mercy. That's the main reason why we don't eat meat, because compassion and mercy begins by extending compassion to all the living entities. So with that, let me get into the first point that I wanted to talk about in today's verse. And that is the importance of doing yajna or sacrifice. Yajna is one of Lord Vishnu's names. So to do yajna means to do what pleases Vishnu or Krishna. The Vedic scriptures tell us that human life is meant for austerity, not for the sake of becoming a yogi or acquiring some insignificant mystic perfections or fame, but for the sake of pleasing Krishna. In its most basic sense, austerity means to curb the instinctual behavior that is natural to our conditioned mind. If you look at animals, so I like to watch these National Geographic movies from time to time, and you can see how animals behave completely based on instinct. And human beings who behave based on instinct are no better or no more than these animals. So the purpose of human life is to realize our relationship with Krishna, inquire about that relationship, and do some austerity. And that austerity is primarily to say, every time you feel you want to do something instinctually that your mind tells you to do, to pause and reflect. Is this something that will take me closer to Krishna? Is this something that is enjoined in the scriptures? Is this something that the society of devotees would encourage so that I can progress on my spiritual path? So austerity doesn't mean, especially in today's day and age of Kali Yuga, it does not mean going to the Himalayas and sitting in freezing cold for 17 years without food and water, curbing the mind, just concentrating on Krishna's form within the mind, within the heart, Paramatma. No. Austerity means something else, and I'll come to that. So, our mind says we get up in the morning. Why get up right now? You had a late night and it was such a tough day at work. Sleep for a couple hours longer. And then why chant in the morning? There are 16 hours in a day, waking hours. You can chant anytime. Sleep in a little, chant later. You deserve it. Yeah, the mind sometimes tells us like this. Or, there's a festival going on that one part of us wants to attend it. The mind says, I'd rather go to that movie with these friends who are coming around, or lie in bed and, just eat and chill. Or tomorrow is Rath Yatra in Philadelphia, Lord Jagannath's Rath Yatra. And yes, it's a little bit of an austerity to travel a couple hours to go down to Philadelphia. And so, we might have other things planned, going cycling or biking or whatever it is. And the mind might tell us, look, you've already attended so many Rath Yatras in your life. You even did New York Rath Yatra in June this year, maybe some others since. Why don't you relax and, go another time, right? I'm not saying we should not go hiking or biking or whatever else. We should absolutely take care of our health. And that includes exercise, family time, relaxation activities, taking care of our emotional, spiritual, material needs. But when we consciously decide to curb what our instinctive nature or our mind tells us to do and do something to serve Krishna or his devotees in its place, that is a sacrifice. That is yajna. In Bhagavad-Gita chapter 3, Krishna talks about sacrifice. In 3.9, he says, Bhagavad-Gita 3.9, Yagyarthat karmano anyatra loko ayam karma bandhanaha tadartham karma kaunteya mukta sangaha samachara. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. The stress, I put the stress on the word has. Krishna says has to be performed, not that it should be performed or might be performed. Work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, perform your prescribed duties for his satisfaction. And in that way, you will always remain free from bondage. Srila Prabhupada in the purport says, since one has to work even for the simple maintenance of one's body, the prescribed duties for a particular social position and quality of a human being are so made that the purpose can be fulfilled. We have to work for our maintenance. We can do our work, but if we do it in the consciousness that I'm doing this for Krishna, then the purpose of our human life will be advanced. Krishna then goes on to explain in the 3rd chapter how in the beginning of creation, he set up this system of sacrifice. It's an interlocking system of sacrifice so that all living beings can live happily and achieve ultimate spiritual perfection by living life as an offering of sacrifice to him. He goes on to say, the devotees of the Lord are released from all kinds of sin because they eat food which is offered first for sacrifice. Others who prepare food for personal sense gratification verily eat only sin. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport not just that devotees should eat prasad, but that devotees should only eat prasad. There's a difference. Every devotee, I heard His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami make this brilliant point several years ago, that every devotee is convinced of the power of prasad, but how many of us stop to think of the power of non-prasad to contaminate our consciousness? And so Prabhupada says we should eat only prasad. And actually, what we are encouraged to do is to honor prasad, not eat it, because it's actually Krishna's mercy that we are eating. In the next verse, which is Bhagavad-Gita 3.14. So these two verses, if you want to note down and later on read the verses and the purports, they're brilliant. 3.13 and 3.14. Krishna says something very interesting. All living bodies subsist on food grains, which are produced from rains. Rains are produced by performance of yajna, sacrifice. And yajna is born of prescribed duties. So, today's materialistic scientists have all kinds of theories as to how and why rains are produced. Krishna is saying very directly, rains are produced by performance of yajna. So the yajna that's mentioned in today's Bhagavatam verse 9.15.25 refers to fire sacrifice, for which ghee is essential. Ghee comes from milk which is provided by one of the 7 mothers of mankind, that is Mother Cow. In Kali Yuga, of course, the scriptures repeatedly enjoin that there is only one yajna that one should perform, and that is the Sankirtana yajna. Lord Chaitanya gave us the formula for this Sankirtana yajna. Chant Hare Krishna, hear Krishna Katha, Śrimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad-Gita, and so on. Fill ourselves with Krishna, essentially. We chant on our beads, we chant in the streets together with other practitioners, or we chant in a temple room or at home. And then Mahaprabhu said to everyone, go out and share the message of Bhagavad-Gita and Śrimad Bhagavatam with everyone that we meet. That is the process that Srila Prabhupada brought to the whole world. Prabhupada's genius was to innovate in a way that endless varieties of people with their unique predilections, likes, dislikes, can incorporate this instruction of Lord Chaitanya's, which is to perform the yajna or sacrifice of Sankirtana, of sharing the holy name, sharing the message of Krishna with others. Prabhupada's genius made it so that we can incorporate this instruction into our lives without really having to undergo some of the life changes that people in ages gone by would have to do. They would have to give up everything, or they would have to, move into an ashram, or live in the forest, or live in a spiritual community cut off from the rest of the world. Nothing. Mahaprabhu himself emphasized, keep your situation the way it is, add Krishna to it, and add this process of chanting, hearing Krishna Katha, and sharing with everyone. Srila Prabhupada emphasized the basics and the principles of the process of Sankirtana. He gave us a framework, but the details of how we do it, he encouraged innovation in the endless forms that this process of Sankirtana can take. So we can be who we are in our social, professional, familial lives, in family matters, and still practice this process of sharing. It is not that we can only do that by being out on the streets every day, chanting Hare Krishna and distributing sacred books. Of course, to the extent we can do that, we should and we must, because it's not just purifying, but it's extremely uplifting and joyful. But the main point is we fill ourselves with Krishna and we share with others as best as we can in a way that is appropriate to time, place, and circumstance. So the second key point that today's Bhagavatam verse reveals is about envy. You see, Jamadagni Rishi, we've been hearing in the daily Bhagavatam, he received Kartavirya Arjuna so courteously and accorded him great honor and respect. But Kartavirya Arjuna saw the unparalleled opulences of the Kamadhenu cow, with which Jamadagni was able to feed the entire army of Kartavirya Arjuna and receive them so sumptuously. And that inflamed the massive amount of envy that existed in Kartavirya Arjuna's heart. He was such a powerful king. He had 1,000 arms. He once imprisoned Ravana, who was such a terrible demon. And yet, envy sprouted into a tree the instant he was received by Jamadagni Rishi, and he saw Jamadagni's Kamadhenu cow and what it could do. That envy led to disastrous consequences, not just for Kartavirya Arjuna, but for the entire race of the Kshatriyas, his kingdom, and all the warrior class around the world, as we will see later in this chapter. I remember growing up in India, there used to be a brand of television sets called Onida. In the 1980s, they advertised massively on television and in other media. You know what was their tagline? Neighbors envy, owners pride. The whole purpose, and they would show a devil, with
He's
horns.
talking about an Indian TV brand.
Yeah,
The slogan was neighbors in envy, owners pride,
absolutely.
from when he was in India. And he's talking about how it was just blatantly advertising that you can make your neighbor envious.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, it's not just that. You look around, you see ads for luxury watches or luxury cars, or even these $50 million apartments in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And you see those ads or the write-ups, and they say, you will be the envy of everyone who knows you.
Mm-hmm.
Envy is an established cornerstone of material existence.
Mm-hmm.
No matter how much money someone makes, there'll always be someone who makes more. Or someone who used to be a junior and now they have a big hotshot job somewhere. Maybe even in your own company, you are at a certain level and that person who used to be junior to you is now 3 levels up. Our whole civilization, for lack of a better word, is built on making people envious.
Mm-hmm.
The whole consumption economy. Buy fancy cars, buy watches, buy cars, buy
No, he's saying everything that I say.
What?
He's talking about the whole the culture of rising to the top, buying fancy cars, and how it's all about inciting envy in other people. It's really interesting. He's I'm on the exact same page as him.
Yeah.
On a lot of topics, actually.
Yeah. That's good.
Thank you, Rohini. And so sure, for their own use, but deep down, most people, especially materialistic people, want to show off how rich or fortunate or whatever it is that they are. But generating envy in someone is harmful to us also. It hurts the other person's spiritual life, and it subjects us to suffering and torment from their envious actions towards us. Envy is a terrible disease, whether it is to have inside of oneself or to be the object of envy. And it's very subtle. We may think I'm practicing bhakti. I've been a devotee all my life. I grew up in a devotee family, or I've been practicing for so many decades. I'm not really an envious person. I've been chanting Hare Krishna for a while now. I think I'm over it. Careful. Envy can strike us when we least expect it. In devotee circles, we might not be envious of others' wealth or possessions, though that can certainly exist too. But devotees can get envious of someone's abilities or service that someone else does. I can sing so nicely. Why do I not get asked to lead kirtans like such and such devotee? Why do they always get asked to lead kirtans at festivals? I'm as good a singer. Or I would make such a better temple president than that person who's running that temple right now. And I deserve to give Bhagavatam classes regularly, at least once a week, if not daily. I'm such a fountain of wisdom. The difference between envy and jealousy is that jealousy is passive, envy is active. Jealousy is more of a passive feeling. It can come and go. But envy is an active expression of that feeling of jealousy. But careful, you might say, well, I'm jealous. I'm not really envious. But jealousy can and does lead to envy. So we shouldn't feel complacent if we feel a twinge of jealousy, that I'm not doing anything to harm the other person. I'm just, momentarily jealous. Jealousy might not lead us to harming another, but the envy that it leads to inside of our heart can end up damaging one's own life. Envy targets the envied, the person that we envy, but it actually torments the envious. It makes us miserable about other people's success. It makes us delight in others' failure. It makes us want to pull down others. Anyone who has power, fame, prestige, or an opulence that we want but don't have ourselves can generate this envy in our heart. In Mahabharata, Duryodhan is the epitome of enviousness. The head Kaurav, the son of Dhritarashtra, his whole life was driven by huge amounts of envy directed at the Pandavas. They were loved by the citizens, he was not. They had strength and valor. He had, but he felt they had more. They got Draupadi when he was desperately trying to marry her. So he was just envious, and he spent his entire life in a torment of internal mental agony, trying to destroy the Pandavas. And no matter how much someone achieves, Duryodhana had so many things. The Pandavas were such wonderful devotees. Even though they were being targeted by Duryodhana's envy, they kept offering, well, why don't you have half the kingdom? So they divided the kingdom. But then Duryodhana came over to their side of the kingdom, and he had actually given the bad side of the kingdom to them, land that was mountainous, not cultivable, rocky, not really lush and fertile land. But because the Pandavas always had Krishna's blessings, that land became miraculously lush and fertile. And Duryodhana came there, saw that side, and he got envious. And he said, I must have that half also, even though he had so much. And in today's verse, Kartavirya Arjuna had so much. Every king on the planet was afraid of him. But he saw the Kamadhenu cow and he got envious. And so envy sentences the envious to a perpetual existence of dissatisfaction and discontent. And ultimately, it leads us to become envious of Krishna. In 16th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita, Krishna talks about the divine and the demoniac natures, yeah? And he describes the characteristics of the divine and the demoniac people. And he says in the 18th verse, bewildered by false ego, strength, pride, lust, and anger, the demons become envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is situated in their own bodies and in the bodies of others, and blaspheme against the real religion. Krishna says, I am the ability in human beings, and not a blade of grass moves without his sanction and will. So when someone is doing something wonderful that we think we should be doing, and we become envious as a result of that, we are ultimately being envious of Krishna, because Krishna has empowered that person, and we are questioning, Krishna, why did he do that? Why is that person leading Kirtan? I want to lead Kirtan and become the center of attraction. This envy stops us from going back to the spiritual world. And even when we are in these material bodies, it stops us from having the spiritual experience that a human being is meant to have, of happiness in serving Krishna and his devotees. So we should actively take steps to purge the envy from our heart. Since Rohini, you talked about that particular ad, I wasn't planning to show it, but I'll show a 20-second clip of that Onida ad. It's super interesting. So let's see. Here we go. I have to. No, I can't get rid of the screen on top. So I apologize. That probably won't happen. Okay. So let's talk about how we can purge from our hearts. And I wanted to show a little PowerPoint based on instructions that I've read in Shastra, as well as classes that I've heard from exalted devotees who have practiced the art of purging envy from their hearts and help us to purge envy from our hearts. So let's begin. So the first point in purging envy from our hearts is acknowledging it. We can't cure what is not diagnosed. So if we stubbornly refuse to admit a problem, we cannot cure that problem. The second step is praying for help. And on the next page, I'm going to show a prayer that I particularly like, that we can all, we can pray together. I'll show it on screen and we can pray for Krishna's help in removing envy and any other anartha or undesirable quality we have in our heart.
We're seeing Veda base. Maybe you're not sharing the right screen.
Oh?
Are you sharing your PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'm sharing the PowerPoint.
We don't see that.
Can you see it now or no?
No, I see Veda base.
Oh, thank you for speaking up. I apologize. Okay. How about now?
Okay. Yeah, now it's up.
All right. Thank you. So I talked about acknowledge that we have envy in our heart, or any other quality for that matter, lust, anger, greed, the 3 gates to hell that Krishna talks about in the 16th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita. The second is to pray for help, because these qualities, we really need divine help in order to overcome them. The third is a little difficult. If possible, serve those that you feel envy towards. So if there is a particular person that you are envious of, if possible, if it's, within the realm you live, somewhere where you can do that, or you can help them remotely, serve them with a heart full of penitence and prayer that, Krishna, I'm envious towards this person, but I really want to get over this envy. They are your devotees. So serve that person. The fourth is be around advanced devotees as much as possible. See, devotees who are in love with Krishna are always, one way or the other, thinking of Krishna and sharing about Krishna. So we can be hanging out with devotees, doing social things. We might be on a hike, we might be on a picnic, or, just hanging out at someone's home. But if that's a devotee or a set of devotees who are actually in love with Krishna, the conversation will turn towards Krishna consciousness, will turn towards bhakti. And that bhakti and those conversations nourish our hearts. And when we fill our hearts with Krishna, we push out other feelings that are undesirable, other emotions. And over time, we only become full of Krishna, nothing else. The fifth way of purging envy from our hearts is to imbibe in our lives the first verse of Sri Isha-Upanishad, the teaching of that verse. Everything animate or inanimate that is within the universe is controlled and owned by the Lord. One should therefore accept only those things necessary for himself, which are set aside as his quota. And one should not accept other things, knowing well to whom they belong, that everything belongs to Krishna. And, this is a frequently debated verse in the sense, does it mean we should have no ambition whatsoever? We should not do anything? No, absolutely not. We only have to look at the example of Arjuna, Krishna's dearmost friend. Arjuna was ambitious. He conquered, the world, but for what? Not for his own glory, but for the purpose of establishing Krishna conscious rule and Krishna consciousness in the world on behalf of his elder brother Yudhishthir, and they were all devotees of the Lord. We try our best in whatever endeavors we are involved in, whether it's work or a family or anything. But we always do that with the knowledge and the remembrance. Krishna, all this belongs to you. And if it's your will that I should get it, I will get it. And if not, let me be happy and satisfied with what I've got. Let me not be envious of someone else who has that thing that I'm striving for. And the last is to absorb ourselves in the process of Krishna Bhakti and step by step, baby step by baby step, try to imbibe a mood of serving others. So if you get an opportunity to serve a devotee of the Lord or serve anyone else for that matter, in the matter of sharing Krishna, helping them in their lives, if we try to imbibe that mood and we are simultaneously putting as much of Krishna as we can into our lives, then other emotions like envy and lust and anger and greed will not have any room in our hearts. So I want to go to the prayer that I was talking about. I heard it from one of my very exalted teachers, His Grace Vaisheshika Prabhu. He's on the board of the Bhakti Center and he comes to New York, at least pre-pandemic, he would come to New York quite regularly. His lectures are online, Vaisheshika Prabhu, very, very exalted teacher. So this prayer I got from him. And let's start by looking at these beautiful forms of Radha Govinda and our Radha Murlidhar, Varaha Nrsimhadev, and Sri Gaurachandra Mahaprabhu at the Bhakti Center. So the prayer is, and you can repeat in your own, you can leave the microphone muted because it might get a little chaotic, but put in the quality or the qualities that you want to get rid of from your own hearts. And repeat the prayer looking at Radha Govinda and Radha Murlidhar, Sri Gaurachandra and Varaha Nrsimhadev. Dear Sri Radha Govinda Dev, dear Sri Radha Murlidhar, if you so desire, please remove any trace of envy, lust, anger, greed, madness, illusion from my heart, so that I can always serve you and your devotees and do good for all living entities. Thank you for considering my request. Isn't that a nice prayer? So I'll leave it on for 1 second more. So the third key point that is revealed in today's verse and purport is the importance of cow protection. Srila Prabhupada has accomplished a staggering amount in establishing and spreading the mission of Lord Chaitanya in the 12 years since he first landed on the shores of America in September of 1965. He wrote dozens of books, established 108 temples and farm communities, took charge of thousands of disciples' spiritual lives, met with influential leaders around the world, gave hundreds of talks, traveled around the world so many times, and firmly established Krishna Bhakti as an authentic religion and a spiritual path to perfection. He managed his global society through personal visits and letters, hardly any phone calls, and certainly no video calls or emails. One thing that shines through his books and letters and his talks is his deep desire to establish farm communities and cow protection around the world. He wanted city temples to be connected to farm centers so that the deities would be offered fresh produce and milk products from sustainable farms and cows that were protected for the entire duration of their lives. So we have a few farm communities in America and many abroad, and devotees are setting up more and more gradually. For those of us who are not farmers and don't wish to move to a rural community, we can at least support these communities in different ways. Here in our own tri-state region, we have Gitanagri Eco Farm within 3 or 4 hours driving distance of New York and New Jersey, depending on where you live. There is New Vrindavan in West Virginia, which many of our devotees regularly go to, and there are other communities. So we can visit these centers, support them, interact with their devotees, encourage them, buy their milk products to offer to Krishna and at home in our temples, and make donations to support their cow protection programs. So these are some of the ways we can support the cow protection that Srila Prabhupada desired. And we ourselves can try to buy milk products from protected cows from these farms wherever practical. So before I open it up to questions and comments, let me summarize what I spoke about today. Yajna or sacrifice is essential for us to fulfill the purpose of human life, which is to realize our relationship with Krishna. In this age of Kali Yuga, the best and indeed the only recommended sacrifice is Sankirtana Yajna. We can practice Sankirtana in different ways that fit our situation and our proclivities, but we must try to share about Krishna in whatever way we can, little or big. We spoke about envy, how it poisons our existence and keeps us away from Krishna. We also spoke about how to purge that envy from our hearts. Firstly, by recognizing that it exists, praying for help in removing it, serving those that we might be envious of, surrounding ourselves by advanced devotees, remembering that Krishna is the proprietor and enjoyer of everything and everyone, and that we all get our quota of what is due to us, and absorbing ourselves in bhakti and trying to imbibe a mood of service to others. And lastly, I spoke briefly about cow protection and some ways that we can assist in it. So with that, let me pause and ask for questions, comments, corrections. I thank you for your patience. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Greetings. I wanted to ask a question in regards to what if one is not intentional causing envy to others? What can one do if I'm not trying to make it, someone jealous? How can I tried I tried being nice and stuff so they can see that I'm a nice person, and I don't want to cause any disturbance with her peace. And what if it's the other way around? I mean I prayed on it, and I don't know, it doesn't seem like it's like I mean, maybe I just want her acknowledgement, but sometimes if I'm around, she'll just walk away from me and I'll try to greet her. And so what can one do if it's the other way around?
So sometimes it can be helped. Certain people, we may try our best, but they will be envious no matter what. And then for our own spiritual life and for theirs, we stay our distance and don't try to interact with them. But, devotee means sensitive. So we try our best not to excite envy in other people. So for example, if someone has a, particular opulence, not flaunting it, to say that, oh, you live in a, 300 square foot apartment in Manhattan, and I live in a penthouse on 57th Street overlooking, the theater district, maybe not trying to flaunt that in their face. Or if someone has a child, you have a child and someone has been trying for years and they don't have a child, not flaunting it in their face as to, look how wonderful my child is, and look at all the joy I get from raising this child, or anything like that. So being sensitive towards people and trying to understand what might be a cause of envy in someone else's heart I think that's one step. Devotee means being sensitive. And one of my teachers, Rukmini Devi, who comes on this channel very frequently, she's also a very dear friend. I heard her say once, let me remember the exact verse. I heard her say once that devotee is always encouraging someone in their spiritual life. And if you feel you cannot encourage someone in their spiritual life, then maybe you just keep quiet or stay the distance. Don't discourage, don't deflate someone's enthusiasm to practice bhakti. So I thought that was a nice instruction. So, these are some of the things that you can try, but sometimes people, they don't want to change their natures, or they're just full of envy, and then trying not to be around them might be a good way of protecting both yourself and the other person. I don't know if that helps.
That does help, because I wasn't even aware of like what I was doing. If I'm flaunting my child, the fact that I have a child, and I know that's something that she's desiring from her heart. So, and I do talk a lot about my child, but it's only I wasn't aware. So thank you so much for bringing that to my awareness.
Well, I'm not saying that's what might have triggered that envy, but that could be one of the factors. I was using general terms, and since I know you, Angel, I know you have a son, so I just used that as an example. But it may or may not have been the cause. It could be anything else. It could be you have a particular position that she wants, or you live in a particular kind of place that she aspires to but is not able to. So it could be any of a variety of factors. But trying to be sensitive to what might be a trigger is a good strategy.
Thank you so much for a great class too. I also I love your lectures. You go into depth. Yesterday when they were talking about the cows and how even for vegans, like I was vegan before and I didn't notice how much ghee helped my nervous system. And I was very I didn't want to take ghee in the beginning because I was concerned about harming the cow. And then I took the Ayurveda training and I did some research on it, and I struggle with my nervous system a lot. So and grains too, they're very grounding. And I didn't realize how much the grains and ghee really helps with my nervous system, and offering that to God first. And it does really help. And for vegans, I feel like you said it, like we can donate some money to the protection of cows, and even prayers to go a long way. So thank you so much for,
of course. And thank you to all the folks who put comments. I know some of them had to leave for work and stuff. Melissa, Tina, Hemangi, Jamuna Jaya, I think left, Andrea, and someone whose name is iPhone, so I don't know who that is, but thank you. And Isabel and others. So thank you very much for your kind comments, Hemangi Devi. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I guess not. So is that there's something that, okay, there's a question there from Karthik. Thank you for your kind comment. What is the source of our envy and pride? Is it placed in our hearts by Krishna or by our free will? It's by our free will, because we want to be the center, we want to be the enjoyer, and anything that interferes with that, generates envy in our heart and anger towards others. And we are under, Krishna has three different kinds of energies. One is the internal energy, one is the external energy or the material energy, and one is the marginal energy. And the marginal energy is the jivas, the living entities. And why we are called marginal is because we are always on the shore. The Sanskrit word is tatastha. Tatastha means on the shore. And we are on the shore of the material and the spiritual. In one direction is material, in one direction is spiritual. And at every moment, we have a choice. Do I turn towards Krishna or do I turn away from Krishna? And the moment we turn towards Krishna, we are under his internal energy, which is headed by Srimati Radharani. She's the personification of Krishna's pleasure potency, Ladini Shakti. And so we come under her protection and guidance. But the moment we turn towards the material energy, we come under Durga, which is an expansion of Radharani's, but it's an expansion that's meant as a corrective teacher. And so, yes, we have our free will. And by that free will, we can choose to be a servant of everyone and try to see that Krishna is in their heart and everyone's ultimately a devotee and help them to come closer to Krishna. Or we can be envious and say that person is much better looking than I am, or has a much better situation than I have. And then that causes us to suffer, and it at least temporarily stops our spiritual progress. Hope that helps, Kartik, too. Thank you. Any other questions? If not, I guess we will call it a day. Anand Bihari Prabhu, thank you. Tomorrow is the wonderful exalted teacher Urmila Devi. So at 7:15, she's a Prabhupada disciple. She's a great teacher. Please tune in for her class.
Yeah, thank you so much, Yasoda-dulal Prabhuji, for your interactive and not graphic. What's the word? For your presentation. It was so nice. I like this step-by-step guide. Really practical and helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your questions, for speaking, for listening, for tuning in. Come tomorrow. Śrimad Bhagavatam.
Yes. Śrimad Bhagavatam tomorrow morning and Philadelphia Rath Yatra at noon. No, Rohini, that's okay. I'm glad you spoke up because you were adding to the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.